Carnegie, I guess there was a public speaking class, I have a note here. Dale asked Frank Bettger if he was interested in what he was saying, and Carnegie said, why don't you talk with a little enthusiasm? So I guess when he started to do his lecture tour, he didn't put the same enthusiasm, and then Dale Carnegie said, well, you know, gotta be a little enthusiastic. I talked about text. Another young agent. I'm sitting, this is before this Realtor.com thing was really catching on, and the email thing. You would get a fax, right? Fax machines were still thermal paper. So I'm sitting at a closing. I said to this agent, I'm interested in buying an investment, and I'd like to, you know, buy something, fix it up, flip it. You know, that was my fantasy. I am the worst general contractor ever. So, but she said, okay. But I said, I don't have time to go see things. So she started just sending me faxes. And the concept was she would send me faxes of houses. I would go drive by with my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife. We would drive by, and then if we were interested, we'd give her a call. Fair enough. So sure enough, we saw some things. We did some drive-bys. We found some dilapidated house. The roof was like literally leaking, stains in the ceiling, all of this. And she got into the crawl space in her pantsuit, walking, you know, in the early 2000s. And we ended up buying the house. And then it was supposed to be a flip, but we ended up living there. So go figure, worst general contractor ever. But doesn't get, and so that was interesting because I just, you know, mentioned to her that we were interested. Walter P. Chrysler. So we're going to jump around, but we're so enthused. Is everybody enthused? Are you on? Are you on fire?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm feeling it. So this guy Chrysler, apparently there was a couple of guys. There was the Dodge brothers, there's that guy Ford, and this guy Chrysler. So have you heard of him? Right?
Yeah,
So yeah, the building. Oh, in New York City. It's very, it has that. It goes like this.
Yeah.
Goes up. Goes up. So Chrysler said, he said, when asked the secret of success, he listed various qualities such as ability, capacity, energy, but added that the real secret was enthusiasm. That's Walter P. Chrysler. Yes, more than enthusiasm, said Chrysler, I would say excitement. I like to see men get excited. It is 1947. I would like to say excited. I would like to see men get excited. When they get excited, they get customers excited, and we get business. Give me a hurrah! Oh, do you feel it? Oh my gosh. We just have to get warmed up. That's how it goes. Oh.
What happens after the warm-up?
Oh my gosh, wait a second. So let me digress. So Frank Bettger said, that's the idea that put him back into selling after he had quit. So Frank Bettger says, see the people. Frank was going to quit the life insurance business, but then he hears the president of the company state the following. Because he was literally packing his stuff up, as in the book, and he's on the way out with his stuff because he's quitting. But they were having an office meetings, right, just like this. And so the guy was speaking, and the guy at the insurance company says, show me, again it's 1947, sorry. Show me any man of ordinary ability who will go out and earnestly tell his story to 4 or 5 people every day, and I will show you a man who just can't help making good. That's a good one. So that's why I say, in the summary, it says, see the people. So Frank, so we're good on the enthusiasm part? So then he starts getting into record keeping. So Frank made a record of the number of calls he made. So in the insurance business, I guess they got leads. So people put postcards in, they mail them in, and then maybe that's where they were getting to make phone calls. So you'd have to adapt it to the year 2023, whether it comes from wherever your leads come from. But he made a record of the number of calls he made. So I don't know where he got the names to call. That's a whole other book, isn't it? Mm-hmm. How many calls do you think he made a year?
5,000.
He said 2,000. That was good. That was good. That was good. He made 2,000 calls to get at least 4 to 5 appointments in a day. So if we relate it to his particular business, insurance, he just wanted to be sitting at 4 to 5 kitchen tables a day, or maybe in somebody's office, right? 4 to 5 kitchen tables a day in order to make a sale, right? So he didn't make a sale at that kitchen table. That was just getting to the kitchen table. Then, out of those 5 times 5 is 20, out of those 20 calls per week, he was gonna get X amount of business. Fair enough, right? Like I find, and I say it's a moment of growth. If I did 1% of everything in the book, that'd be great. If I did everything in the book, I wouldn't be sitting here, I'd be on a yacht somewhere. No, I'd be sitting here, you know why? Because I wanna be with you. So he said, how much was each call worth? So he was evaluating, like I guess they made a phone call and eventually you get to an appointment. How many times do you have to call someone to get to that point? So he did some record keeping, and I made a note. Frank Bettger kept records of the sales calls he made. He made the record and showed that 70% of his sales, so if it was sales, we're talking about the kitchen table, right? Out of those 4 to 5, 70% of his sales were made on the first interview. So just as an example, I guess you might go visit someone and it's changed, but they were live. Go sit at the kitchen table, well, we'll think about it. Then you'd come back, sit with them again, and then maybe they're still in this process of decision making, and maybe go back a 3rd or a 4th time. He made the record and showed that 70% of the sales were made on the first interview. 70%. 23% of his sales were made on the second interview. And 7% of these calls were on the 3rd and after. But listen to this, I'm just reading. 50%, this is him speaking, but listen to this, 50% of my time was spent going after the 7%. So right, he had 70% of the people were buying right away. Then he was working that. He spent 50% of his time just going after those extra calls that were the 7% of his sales. So in his particular business, he said, why bother with calling those people that are falling in the 7% category? He put his time and effort in concentrating on the first call and the second call. And then I did another presentation and somebody else, they said they had different statistics. And even in the book, Frank Bettger's book, he related some other industry where they determined it was 5 calls. So I guess if you're selling some gigantic industrial complex, right, it's probably a lot more calls. But if you're selling real estate, trying to hone in on what we do here, or not what you do, right? Because I'm just a real estate attorney. So he relates that percentage could change, but that was an interesting, because you only have so much time in a day. So I thought that was interesting. He relates the story of a fellow named Clay Hamlin, and he says, so he went back to a baseball analogy, and the guy says, you can't hit them if you don't swing at them. So if you don't mind, I'll read it. And this is right from his book. I found was just as true in selling as in baseball when they played the Cardinals. We had a right fielder, Steve Evans. Steve was a big, powerful fellow, built on the lines of Babe Ruth, and he could hit a ball as hard as Babe Ruth. But Steve had a bad habit. The habit of waiting. The habit of waiting. Usually 2 strikes cold on him before he even started to swing. Remember one important game with Steve, the 9th inning, 2 outs, he didn't swing. Steve picked out his favorite bat. He started to play everybody else. Please swing, hit the first ball. But he didn't. You can see Steve intended to slam the first one, the ball shot straight across. Did the same thing on the second. Anyways, he lost. Every time I see a salesman sitting around the office during selling hours, playing solitaire with prospect cards, I see Steve Evans up there with his bat on his shoulder, letting the good ones on by. Then I hear the manager say, what the hell are you waiting for? Selling is the easiest job in the world if you work it hard. And the hardest job in the world if you try to work it easy. Selling boils down to this. You can't get a commission unless you make a sale. You can't make a sale unless you write up a contract or an order. And you can't write a contract or an order until you have an interview. And you can't have an interview until you make the phone call. If that doesn't double your income right there, I don't know what it is. Business has changed. For the most part of the time, our sale starts when someone calls. So for myself, I have a different sale going on. So one, my moment of growth is, I know I have to do a better job of going out and seeing agents. I'm being honest. That's what would be better for me, right? Because for my own moment of growth, doing a better job of staying in touch with people. But when people call our office, we're stellar. People call our office because we got the call. Getting that first part the hardest, but once we have the call, we have a high closing rate, right? You don't hear attorneys talk about closing rate because we're really a consultant advisor. People call, usually they're referred to us. It's probably an easy sale, but still people call us from the web. People call us, and once we have a phone call, then we're able to share with them what knowledge we have, what advice we have, what we can do to help them. So I find that that is one of the biggest things is, how do you find and get to that point of seeing the people? So that's one of my biggest takeaways from that. And that's why I say this is not like your typical attorney presentation. I'm talking about my office. One thing he talks about in the book that helped him really grow, he said, he had to overcome fear. And one of the things he did to overcome fear was speak to groups. Ease of speaking to individuals and self-organization. So he went out, he joined the Rotary clubs, he went out and joined, what are those speaking clubs? Anyone?
I think he joined the mastermind, right?
A mastermind, or there's things where you could just go out and get comfortable speaking. Or if you belong to organizations, just offer yourself up to do a presentation. Right, a presentation really only has to be 8 or 10 minutes. And seek out opportunities to speak. For me going out, nothing to do with real estate. I love theater and magic, right? So for me, that's just a lot of fun. It makes me feel good. I like to say I'm up to 2 packs a day.
Of cards.
And one of the things is, right, when we talk about going out and seeing the people. I went into the juice house, the juice bar nearby, and there was one of the girls working there, and apparently she works for Google. So she's doing this for fun. She had her mornings free. She's very entrepreneurial, and she's going to school, and we got involved in really a great conversation, and I was able to share with her what I do, and then it turns out her dad owns a bunch of businesses, and it was just interesting. But one of the reasons I ended up talking to her was because I had put on my favorite sport jacket. Because I woke up in the morning, I couldn't figure out what to wear. And then I wasn't really feeling up that day. And then, you ever have those kind of days? Right? How do you get motivated? How do you go out and see the people? Because it comes back to that. So I put on my favorite sport jacket, and I like to say I was feeling pretty jonesed up. So when I saw her, and then when she says she has to put my name on the cup, and then that was my opening. I said, you don't know my name? It's on the bulletin board. I got my business card up there. And then that got the conversation going. One of my favorite people in the world is my wife. One of the things she does, she's a lousy salesperson, by the way. But she has a gift. And that gift is, when we're out, she sees a baby, I'm ready to walk on by. She has to stop and visit the people. She sees the baby. You know what I'm talking about? She engages with people just without even thinking about it. She just loves people. And I think that's part of this seeing the people thing is every day there's some moment, which is that destiny moment. You have to every day think about what's going to come about, and in the moment that you're in, hopefully identify that might be a moment that something could grow out of that. But I can't tell you what it is because you don't know, because not until you're there will you know it. So the one thing Frank did is he talked about record keeping. So back in the day, and I read in the book, he actually put a print from his own record. On an index card, he kept track of every call he made, and he was tracking. He called Bob first time, second time, third time, and that's how he came up with those stats. So a recommendation from the book, this is why I say this could double your income. Right? Because you're putting time and effort in every day. First, you got to put your sport jacket on and feel good about yourself and go out and see the people. But then, once you're seeing the people and finding who to call, then we have to continue to keep track of how we're doing. Because sometimes we were talking about earlier, just sending emails out to people and how people don't want to be bombarded. But I guess by the same time, how many times are you going to touch base and contact people and eventually know that it's not worth your time? But the only way you could come up is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times is by doing your own record keeping. And I think that, and I've been looking for something called CRM, but he did CRM, it was index cards, and that's how he kept track. An interesting thing he talked about was barbershops in the book. Barbershops. He says to his barber, the guy wasn't doing well, he says, well, why don't you make appointments? He says, what do you mean? Because, right, you go to the old-fashioned barbershop, everybody's lined up waiting, and he says to the barber, Antonio, why don't you just, make an appointment? If you make an appointment, I'll come every Thursday, 8 a.m. And then he said, hey, Joe. And he says to Joe, he said, would you come? Yeah, put me on every 2 weeks. But what's interesting, that came about because of the pandemic as well. All of a sudden, you couldn't go to the barber shop, those guys that had the chairs lined up. So I like the one over here, Carlos, and Patty gives a great cut, if you know anybody who needs a cut. And but I only wanted Patty. So I just go to Booksy, and now you don't have to wait. But they only started Booksy because of the pandemic. But what a great thing for their business. These people were sitting around waiting for people to walk in the door. Now they got it so that people are scheduling. They just have to show up and come because people are scheduling. How great is that? And it was
It's
great for
funny
me.
though, this always existed for women. Women always made appointments,
Yeah.
but men
Yeah.
never made appointments. They just walked in
An old-fashioned
and waited.
barbershop,
I
yeah.
don't know why.
And you can wait forever for a haircut sometimes.
Well, in the men's arena, it was called a hairstylist. Those are the guys who made
Yeah.
the appointment. And then, so the barbershop I thought was interesting. One thing he mentioned was Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin is a motivational speaker back from the 1700s. And one thing Ben said, he called it the 6 o'clock club. So an interesting question would be, and I realize real estate probably is more evening oriented. Is that a fair guess? Or I could be wrong.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. So Frank Bettger says his advice to a young salesman was join the 6 o'clock club. Ben Franklin said, I'll read it, that only a few men live, again it's 1947, sorry. Ben Franklin said that only a few men live to old age and fewer still even become successful who are not early risers. So I set my alarm clock an hour and a half early in the morning, and an hour of that time is used for reading and studying. This is Ben Franklin. And of course, I soon found myself going to bed earlier, but I thrived on it. Frank Bettger relates the story of a young salesman who felt that he was about to quit. He said he just couldn't get organized. Frank Bettger suggested he join the 6 o'clock club. And he set Saturday morning aside for self-organization, and soon the young salesman's troubles were over, and he was selling successfully. I know for myself, every morning, I love to stare at the calendar. I get up in the morning, I'm a little groggy, I get my coffee, and one of the things I do, I stare at the calendar to digest the day, or digest the week. And that's on a small scale, right? Or what's going on, meaning you have your real estate business, you have, I didn't even talk about Bennigan's. Did I talk about Bennigan's? I gotta make a note, we gotta talk about Bennigan's. The 6 o'clock club. So he's an advocate to join us, so you get things done and organize yourselves. The other thing he set aside was, he set aside self-organization day. So for him, it was Saturday mornings. He would sit down and he would make his list of what was the plan of attack for the week. So he didn't wait till this morning to think about what calls he's gonna make. He had his week planned out. All those meetings, those 5 a day, they were already on the calendar for him. He wasn't making calls and setting them that day. He had a guy, there's a great story in the book, one of his sales managers wanted to meet him on a certain day in Poughkeepsie or wherever he was gonna be. And he told the guy he couldn't meet him, but he could meet him next week. So when they did finally get together, he says, oh, where were you on that day that I said I wanted to get together? He says, I was here. He says, but why'd you make me wait a week and I had to travel extra to see you? He said, well, it wasn't on my schedule. Because scheduling was so important that, so we schedule, right? A closing gets scheduled. Can you imagine if you actually, that's pretty hard, right? You have the closing. You're gonna be there for your client for the closing. If someone calls you that day to show a house, I think you're gonna be at the closing and you're gonna schedule them at some time. So I think that's an easy one. But then I guess the question would be is if you had put this time aside to schedule your self-organization day. You said, I'm gonna do Saturday morning, as an example. And someone said they wanted to schedule something with you that time. You said, well, I can't do that. This is my dedicated time. So getting a calendar, like kids in high school, right? Do they do good scheduling? I don't know. It used to be making a schedule and you get that schedule. So we all heard the 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents poor performance. Don't leave it to chance. Make a plan, make a schedule, and then see the people. I can't wake up and find them on the spot. The prospect fairy won't visit you in the morning with the magic list. I love that one. And that reminds me of my cousin Vinny. Are these magic grits? Grits don't cook themselves. There's no magic to seeing the people. You gotta plan to do it, whatever it might be. In the days of Frank Bettger, he made a schedule of prospects. I was a Cutco salesman. One of the things they told me, ever hear of Cutco? Wherever Cutco? In college, you go and they say you get a sample set. I had to buy the sample set, and I still have of these knives. And then you had to go to people's houses to sell them cutlery. And then hopefully, the big thing was, if you did a girl is gonna get married, so she has the box, you put stuff aside. You don't even have a broom yet. You have no, this is true. I learned this from Cutco. A box, it was a box, and you keep putting the dishes and the stuff in, because someday I'm gonna get married. And the box has a name. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, so in Cutco, we would talk about this. Well, you should buy these cutlery for your daughter's this box. I wish I could remember the name of the box. But at the end, if you didn't make a sale, you'd say to the people that you visited, do you have 5 people, actually 10, do you have 10 people you could recommend me to? And then, can we call them now? That would be a better one. Can we call them on the phone and set up an appointment? Get me to go see your cousin Vinny, whoever it might be. Or Frank talks about he would see his prospects and he had a card and it was introducing Frank Bettger, and he would put, the person would put their name and sign it. And that way he could show, hey, your friend Joe said you should see me. Check my time. So I'm going down Route 9. There was a real estate office, so unnamed. And I walk into the office, and you walk in, and they have this desk, and usually it's 3 or 4 agents sitting there. And I walk in, and they're all sitting there, and they're waiting for the phone to ring. And I say, hey, am I going to real estate? And we get to talking. Oh, they're whining. They go, oh, things have changed. Oh, these young ones, because it used to be you signed a contract on the hood of your car in pen. Anybody remember that? Right? You actual contract with pen and ink and faxing. So now there's DocuSign and people don't know what they're signing. But I walk into the office and they said things are changing. That people are working from home. They don't come into the office. The phone's not ringing, because it used to be people actually walked into the real estate office. Hey, I want to buy a house, or they called that office and then they got hooked up, and what they call it, desk time or something, the up call, and that's how they got business. So I always thought it was interesting that they weren't changing. They told me exactly what was going on, but they were sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. So I love that story.